Mr. President,
Senator from Hawaii.
I want to thank the Senator from Minnesota, junior and the senior senator from Minnesota, for their incredible leadership and serving as a ballast, not just for the people of their country, of their state, but for the whole country. Tyranny is tyranny, and the people of this country, whatever our other differences, don't want anything to do with it. You might be a liberal, you might be a conservative, you might be for immigration, or you might be against it. You might think that guns should be more readily accessible, or you might think that guns should be harder to purchase. But when the United States government is killing your fellow citizens in your name, none of that matters. Because tyranny is tyranny, no matter the tyrant. Overreach is overreach, regardless of cause, and state violence is state violence. And it is against everything that this country stands for. There is a reason that a very unusual and unusually broad coalition of unlikely partners quickly converged in the wake of the tragedy, and it wasn't some organizing strategy. This was organic across the country and certainly across the great state of Minnesota. It was liberals, it was conservatives, it was gun owners, it was clergy members, it was business executives, it was libertarians, it was Trump voters. Why the new unity? Because people from different places and persuasions, faiths, and financial situations understand that at least on the very narrow question of freedom and liberty, our fates and our futures are intertwined. No one is free until everyone is free. In my Jewish tradition, during Passover Seder, it's customary to recount the story of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. And the reason the story is told anew every year is to remind us that the struggle for freedom is not confined to the past and limited to others, but instead has to live inside of all of us. The Haggadah says, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord our God brought us out of there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. Not they, but we. The point being that however many generations removed we are from that story, we're still obligated to see ourselves as though we were personally freed from slavery in Egypt. No one is free until everyone is free. Our founders knew that too. The Constitution deliberately begins with we, the people. The Declaration of Independence promises equality and certain unalienable rights that we hold to be self-evident. A collective responsibility to protect freedom and liberty is central to the American experiment. It always has been. Which is why in the summer of '63, sitting in a dark jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama, in the throes of the battle for civil rights, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all, indirectly. No one is free until everyone is free." That same spirit of solidarity has united people for generations. In Hawaii, it was the sugar plantation workers in the 40s, tired of being overworked and underpaid, who organized across ethnic lines for fairer conditions. Up until that point, they had been divided by the plantation owners into separate camps: Chinese camp, Japanese camp, Filipino camp, and so on, and paid different rates for the same work. And so they came together vowing to treat an injury to one as an injury to all. They went on strike and won, altering the trajectory of workers in Hawaii to this day. An injury to one is an injury to all. No one is free until everyone is free. If there's a lesson in this collective outrage and widespread condemnation of ISIS conduct, it's that people don't want state-sponsored violence on their streets in their names. It's not a question of whether you voted for Trump or Biden. It's not a question of whether you agree with Joe Biden's immigration policy. And the idea that the immigration enforcement has to be accompanied by enthusiastic cruelty is so far out of the mainstream of American society. Nobody wants this save for a handful of people intoxicated by power and deluded by their own fantasies. Thuggery is not strength. Strength must be used to protect people, to give a voice to the voiceless and make people feel safe. That is impressive and noble and important, precisely because it's harder to practice and harder still to come by. But that's what makes the response in Minnesota of ordinary Americans taking it upon themselves to stand up for their neighbors so extraordinary. I want to read a bit of what Adam Serwer observed in The Atlantic about the mistaken assumptions that fed this administration's brutality. He wrote, "The secret fear of the morally depraved is that virtue is actually common, and that they're the ones who are alone. In Minnesota, all of the ideological cornerstones of MAGA have been proved false at once. Minnesotans, not the armed thugs of ICE and Border Patrol, are brave. Minnesotans have shown that their community is socially cohesive because of its diversity, not in spite of it. Minnesotans have found and loved one another in a world atomized by social media where empty men have tried to fill their lonely souls with lies about their own inherent superiority. Minnesotans have preserved everything worthwhile about Western civilization while armed brutes try to tear it down by force." End quote. Look, I get that we're all divided and distracted and exhausted and that it's not going to resolve overnight. But in the wake of the tragedies in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, a bright red line has emerged. We can argue about everything else, but we will not tolerate tyranny. I yield the floor.